Today I'm going to be tying a little shrimp pattern called the Red Bomber. So the hook I have in the vise is a Partridge Patriot double, size 12, and I'm going to be using some Centerfly Red 8.0. So just catch on about 3 or 4 mil behind the eye, and we'll take our thread down just to where the weld stops. So we'll go here, trim off our silk, and then I'm going to come in and tie in a tag with some French oval, small gold. So I'll just lay this down on top of the shank, catch it in, just half a dozen turns to make sure it's not going anywhere, and then I'll form my tag. So 3 or 4 turns back toward the bend of the hook. So there's 3, 1 more, and then in between the 2 hooks and over the top. Catch that in. So just trim off, and then I'll take my thread and bind that down. So just back up towards the eye, and then we'll bring it back down to our tag. So the next material I'm going to tie in is some red Arctic Fox. I'll just pull it off, just separate a little bit of that, break it off, and then I'll just remove some of that guard hair. So tips are pretty good, pretty in line. So lengthwise you're probably looking at 1.5 times your shank. Yeah, we'll go there somewhere. So we'll just come in with a couple of turns to bind that down, and then I'm also going to add in a tail of red bucktail. So just a small bunch of bucktail, and then roughly with fingers just try and line the tips up a bit, get them somewhere near, pop them into my hair stagger, so just hold that in front of the camera there. Yep, so you can see they're pretty well lined up there, and I'm going to tie this in probably twice the length of my tail. So again, come over the top there, just with a few turns. I'll take that off again, there's maybe just a bit too much bucktail. So we'll take out roughly 1/3. That's better. Just don't want it too heavily dressed. It's on a 12, quite small, so it's more of a low water fly. And that's okay there. And then I'm going to add in just a couple of strands of micro crystal flash. So tie it in on my side, and then tie it in on the camera side. Again, just a few turns to hold it in place. Come in. Scissors are slightly off camera, but just trim them to length. Now, I also have some white hackle stalks that I've already pre-stripped, so I'm going to add them in for some feelers. So first of all, I have 2 large ones. I'll tie them in first. Quite hard to see because it's off camera. I'll have to make sure and get a few photos of the finished fly that I can get it all in. I can see them not too bad. So just a few turns to hold them in place, and then I have another two that are slightly smaller. So the first two have basically gone either side of the tail, and the second two we're aiming for, oh that's twisted, on top of the tail. There we go, quite a lot going on in this fly. Just make sure you're happy with the positioning. That's pretty good. And then plenty of wraps of thread to hold it in place. And then come in with my scissors and trim off all the excess. Just be mindful when you're doing that there's nothing that slips. Just double check your feelers. Happy enough with them. And then bind everything down. So I'm going to bring my thread back up to my tag, and then at this point, oh, nearly dropped them, I have some Vineyard medium fly eyes. So it's basically monofilament eyes. Oh, hold them in front of the camera. And what I'm going to do is I have the two of them together, set them on top, roughly to the length I want, so aiming for around the bend of the hook. Pinch them in place, and a few wraps of thread. So once you have them tied on, still quite a lot of movement in them, you can manipulate them a bit and just get them to where you want them. I wouldn't worry too much about them at the minute. So again, plenty of turns of thread, and come in with my scissors and trim off the excess. I think maybe just for this one, if I can find my scalpel, yep. Just try and trim off a little bit of that, just to help with the taper. It's maybe time to change that scalpel blade. And then again, bind it all down. Now that that's bound down, I have a hackle here already prepared. This has came from a fluorescent red hen saddle. So just separate the tip, trim it off. Catch it in with plenty of turns. Very, very fine tips in this cape, so it is a little prone to slipping. Catch the end in with my hackle pliers. Nice and gentle. Tips are quite fine, so they're very easy to break. And we'll just come in with a few turns of thread, or sorry, a few wraps of hackle. And basically just keep wrapping until you're down to your stock. And then we'll tie it off. Come in and trim off the excess hackle stock, and then just with your finger and thumb gently persuade all the fibres back from the thread. There we go. Our eyes are well tied in now, so you can, it's the mono, you can bend them, quite flexible, set them the shape you want them. Yeah, that's not too bad. So for my rib, I'm going to be adding some black wire. This is UTC wire. Break off a length, tie it in the full length of your body, and then for the body I'm going to be using some Glow-Brite number 3. I've already pulled off a length of it and doubled it over twice, so I'll just trim off the end of that. Catch it in with a couple of turns, bind it well down, it should be okay, and then in the opposite direction of our thread we're going to wind up towards our eye. Don't worry if there's any gaps in the floss as you're winding it. It should cover as you're coming up. And just up to your eye. A few turns of thread just either side. And then come in with your scissors, nice and tight. Trim that off. The rest will do in my next fly. And then we'll bring our rib up in open turns, just creating a nice segmented body, and hopefully we won't have any slippage when we're coming over our step down. Quite a lot of materials going in. The shrimp eyes are very bulky, so it can create a bit of a step. I think we've got away with this one. So just worry your wire off, and then ready to whip finish. Five turns for the whip finish, and a coat of varnish. So this would be one of my preferred patterns for the end of the season, especially when the water's down a bit. This is tied on a 12. I generally wouldn't tie it any bigger than a 10 for most of my own fishing. I've found that going down a pool where you know there's fish in and they haven't really looked at a few of the traditional sort of patterns, this one can provoke a reaction. There we go, another couple of coats and that'll be ready to go. So there we have the red bomber. Thanks for watching, and I hope you've enjoyed it.